Over the past 3 seasons, no Braves relievers have appeared in more games than Luke Jackson and A.J. Minter. So it's fitting that we lump them together as we continue our Stock Watch series here on Battery Power. I'm Cory McCartney along with Grant McAuley and Grant. 2021 was the season in which Luke Jackson led the Braves bullpen in ERA. A.J. Minter topped the group in Fangraph WAR, and they were 2 instrumental members of that night shift group that manager Brian Snitker put the utmost faith in during the World Series run.
Yeah, 2 more big factors for the Braves bullpen that came up big time down the stretch and, of course, in the postseason as well. I think we've seen a lot of good things from A.J. Minter in particular in the postseason, and we'll get into him. We'll get into Luke Jackson as well, who was, again, right there for the Braves when they needed him in some big moments. And, you know, there was a lot of drama as well that kind of went around these guys throughout the 2021 season, maybe a little bit in the postseason, but by and large, these were 2 big contributors to the Braves winning it all and 2 big members of that night shift that became pretty notable, pretty famous, maybe even spawned a few T-shirts here or there after what they did in the playoffs for the Braves. Big time stuff.
Yeah, so we're going to begin our conversation with Luke Jackson, the friendly neighborhood slider man, if you will, who had been a bit of a one-man roller coaster at times. Solid, but not always spectacular in his first 2 years in Atlanta. Then he gets thrust into that closer role, puts together a pretty solid year with 13 Ks per 9. But a year later, 2020, his ERA balloons to 6.84. There were plenty of questions. Then he tops all Braves relievers in 2021 with that 1.98 ERA, getting that K per 9 back to nearly 10. He's also one of the best, by the way, the best ERA in all of baseball in high leverage situations for guys with at least 40 games pitched in those situations. The roller coaster ride continues through the postseason when, after a strong LDS against the Brewers, he struggles against the Dodgers and delivers a masterful performance after Charlie Morton goes down in Game 1 of the World Series against the Astros. 6 years into his Braves career, Grant, you think you know who Luke Jackson is. Then he throws a wrinkle into things. What are we going to see out of Luke Jackson in 2022?
Well, I would like to think he's going to be able to kind of replicate the success he had in the 2021 season. The 2019 season is when he really had that breakout year, and that was after times in which he was getting cut from the Braves' active roster, and that happened more than once, if memory serves, and it just never seemed like there was going to be a clear play for him and carving out a spot in the Braves bullpen that was going to last an entire season. And in the unlikeliest of unlikely things, when he got that opportunity to close for the Braves for a while in 2019, of course, that postseason didn't go the way that he wanted it to. The 2020 season really felt like these guys were kind of inverted, whereas A.J. Minter struggled in 2019, Luke Jackson was great. Then in 2020, A.J. Minter is great, and Luke Jackson's struggling. And then, at least in that first half, it seemed like we were going back the other way. It's like these 2 guys couldn't have a good season simultaneously, but that all changed in the second half of the 2021 season as A.J. Minter stepped up big time and Luke Jackson put together pretty much bell to bell the best season in terms of Baseball Reference WAR. Would you believe it was 2.3 for Luke Jackson last year? Opponents had an OPS against him of right about 600. They hit below 200 against him. Righties, lefties, it didn't matter. The splits were pretty much identical. Luke Jackson was kind of that unsung hero of that group. Even though he wasn't pitching in the highest leverage situations and closing games anymore, he still had a very important role to play. And you mentioned some stuff went wrong in the NLCS, in particular the Cody Bellinger home run, which is hit on a pitch and a placement in which I can't imagine, that he's going to hit too many more of those out. But be that as it may, that was a big play for the Dodgers at the time. And then you felt like, hey, maybe this is going to happen again when he got in trouble in Game 6 of the NLCS. But Tyler Matzak was there. We've already talked about his heroics, and it's a group effort, and that's always going to be the case for a bullpen. You're not going to have 5, 6, 7 guys all pitching lights out all the time, and it's going to be a matter of just trying to get the best body of work over the course of a season with some highs and lows and some in-betweens, some injuries, and inconsistencies is all going to be part of it. But we aren't talking about 2 guys that, once again, as we come into a brand new season, whenever that is, you're hoping that they're going to be able to pitch some meaningful and some big innings, and a lot of them for the Braves if they plan on not only repeating as National League East champs, but, hey, the goal's a lot bigger now. You won the World Series last year. What about doing that again? These 2 guys could play a big part in that.
So Steamer's projecting some slightly elevated but similar rate numbers for Luke Jackson in 2022. Obviously, he's also a big part of that Braves clubhouse culture. It is worth noting that this is his 3rd and final year of arbitration with an estimated $3.8 million salary under the previous CBA. So we'll see what comes out of these ongoing negotiations. The slider, though, I mean, we know that continues to be an elite weapon for him. A 159 batting average against in 2021, along with a 218 weighted on base average, a 35% whiff rate. Jackson threw that pitch, by the way, 53% of the time in 2021. And what I found interesting is those numbers very similar to 2019 when he really took off. I'd expect though to continue to see a little bit lesser usage of the curveball from him. We saw that in 2021. The numbers dropped to around 11%. That pitch got him in trouble in 2020. In that year, we were talking about a 306 expected weighted on base average that season. And when the slider's working, Grant, he's absolutely deadly. There were only 5 relievers who had a better weighted slider runs above average than Jackson did this past season. And that included Ryan Presley, Edwin Diaz, Blake Trinan, Tyler Rogers, and Giovanni Gallegos.
Yeah, and these are all guys who, as you could tell, make a living off that pitch as well. And Luke Jackson, whether you are kind of in or not in on whether or not he's the answer to the Braves' biggest questions in the bullpen, is irrelevant. He has a role to play, and he has a pitch that's one of the better weapons of any pitch that any Braves reliever can throw at any given time in any situation, if I wasn't able to stress that enough. And this is not an all or nothing kind of thing with relievers. There is a lot, I think, of turnover in a bullpen year after year. There are things that guys struggle through that they have to figure out, which we've talked about some with Luke Jackson here. We'll talk about it with A.J. Minter on the other side. But I do think there's some value that Luke Jackson brings, not only on the mound, but also in that overall dynamic. He's been around for this Braves team. He came in during that rebuild when, you know, jobs weren't guaranteed really to anybody, and maybe they're still not in the bullpen. That's another thing. But you know, he had some highs and lows personally and professionally over the last couple of 3 years and trying to, you know, keep everything on the level that he exploded into in 2019 when he had that breakthrough season. But when the lights were brightest, as the Braves got through that NLCS, Luke Jackson did not remain, you know, kind of scared of his own shadow when he took the mound. He went out there and fired 3 1/3 scoreless innings against the Houston Astros, only allowed, 1 hit, and didn't walk a batter, and piled up 4 strikeouts in those 3 appearances, and was key in helping the Braves bridge that gap when they lost Charlie Morton in the opener. So a lot of important things that Luke Jackson gave to the Braves last year. A big performance in the World Series, I think, should earn him a little bit of whatever was lost in the NLCS in terms of maybe the confidence. I'm sure he got his confidence back if he ever lost it, and he pitched some big innings for the Braves, some very important ones, as did Mr. Minter as well.
Yeah, we're going to talk A.J. Minter in a minute. And it's interesting when you think about, you've got A.J. Minter and Luke Jackson, who we're talking about in this episode. We spent the last one talking about Tyler Matzek. We still have yet to get into Will Smith. And you think about those 4 guys within this bullpen, you know, being that cohesive unit, and that unit that you know is going to be coming back for this next season. Obviously, we saw them be extremely successful during the championship run. Think about the last time when the Braves had that many relievers that they could rely upon and know that those were going to be a core of a bullpen. I mean, you almost, even, you know, when you think about the days of Craig Kimbrell and Eric O'Flaherty and Johnny Venters, there was only 3 guys. And then you kind of search for that 4th weapon out of the bullpen. You think about, you know, when you later on, and you have Luis Avilan and, you know, certainly, you know, Kimbrell again, you know, just the groups that you would have. Yeah, David Carpenter. It wasn't 4 guys. And so you've got just such a foundational piece here when you think about all these guys. And certainly, you know, you mentioned Jackson's been through the fires, but this is a really strong foundation. You know, they really have not had in a very, very long time when you think about what's coming out of the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, it is certainly a great group, but as we've seen with bullpens, a lot can change season to season. And I don't think that you can put too much into it in terms of just overall foundations of the club, because you're going to have to get creative in the bullpen. I think we've learned that year in and year out. But if there's one thing I would say that the group needs, is you mentioned those names. You got Will Smith closing. He's a lefty. We got A.J. Minter we're going to talk about. He's a lefty. We've already talked about Tyler Matzek. He's a lefty. So Luke Jackson is the one right-hander in all of this. So I feel like if they're out there looking for anything when the crazy supermarket sweep of free agents or whatever is going to happen, if they can get to that new CBA sooner than later, maybe go out and find a right-handed reliever that can also, you know, pitch some big innings alongside Luke Jackson. And then it won't be a group where we're talking about, hey, when's the last time you had 4 of these guys? Maybe 5 or more. I mean, I'm just being greedy here about things I'd like to see the Braves get and continue to add to. But the bottom line is the bullpen has been a strength for the Braves, even though at times it has been questioned. The management of it has been questioned, but you can't question the results in the postseason. They quite simply were off the charts, and a huge reason why the Braves won the World Series.
Yeah, I think a right-handed reliever is probably going to be very high on Alex Anthopoulos' shopping list whenever the market does open up. So let's count the ups and downs here of one A.J. Minter, who you just mentioned. During the pandemic-shortened 2020 season, he topped the Braves bullpen with a paltry .83 ERA, found himself being demoted to Gwinnett this past July, came back and was sensational over the last 2 months of the regular season. And aside from his performance in Game 5 of the World Series, dominated over 8 outings in the postseason.
Yeah, he did. And I mean, I remember watching some of the low points for A.J. Minter in the first half and thinking in some part, this is a guy that's just not being very lucky with when the ball's being put in play. He gave up a couple of more home runs than I was used to seeing him give up. And it was just it seemed like nothing was quite going right for as good as 2020 was and as many things that did go right for him in a short amount of time over the course of the shortened season. It seemed like 2021 was taking some of those back time and again for him. But when he did go down to Gwinnett, all he did was start piling up good outings. And when he came back to Atlanta in the second half, as the Braves had to make their push, the Mets started sliding. Atlanta needed the bullpen to do what it was supposed to do, and that's close down games and protect leads. And A.J. Minter may not have been viewed as that number one option that he could have been viewed as in large part in 2020, at least one of the top options. He kind of had to earn it back a little bit, but all he did was put up those results in the second half, a 1.89 ERA, 4.31 opponents OPS against him among the 73 batters that he faced in the final 2 months of the season. And then you look at the postseason version of A.J. Minter that you get lifetime. He's thrown 20 innings. He struck out 31 batters, lest we forget that really gutsy spot start he made in the NLCS in 2020. That had me hopeful that he was going to figure it out at some point in 2021. I just felt like there's too much arm talent there to give up on him. But there were folks that on Twitter, as things go, were saying, I don't ever need to see A.J. Minter pitch in a Braves uniform again. And I just kind of kept thinking in the back of my mind, this guy's going to have a moment at some point, hopefully, that he's going to be able to redeem himself. And he had quite a few of those moments, and quite a few more were in the postseason while he was at it.
Yeah, the 2021 totality was a 3.78 ERA, 1.3 Fangraph WAR, and he did spend 4 weeks in AAA Gwinnett, and then came back and had that success that you had mentioned over the last 2 months. On the year, lefties hit 200 against him. Had a .82 ERA in the playoffs with a paltry 1.08 FIP and a 1.32 batting average against. And I think you kind of mentioned this a little bit for the second straight postseason. Obviously, it was him that made that start, his first since Texas A&M. In Game 5 of the 2021 NLCS against the Dodgers. He was asked to cover innings when Morton went down in Game 1 of the World Series. He went 2 2/3 with 1 earned run on 3 hits and 3 strikeouts. You add that into what he did against the Dodgers and throwing 2 innings and 4 strikeouts in Game 6. In the expansion era, Minter's one of 10 Braves relievers to have thrown at least 3 outings of 2+ in the postseason, along with a night shift buddy Tyler Matzik, by the way. Minter has a 1.35 ERA in postseason outings in which he's thrown more than 2 innings. He's just been fantastic in these situations. And, as much as you question, as you mentioned on Twitter, this guy is, if you need something in high leverage, this guy is proving every bit the capabilities to do it.
Yeah, he's one of the guys on the short list for the Braves, and that's why he's in that night shift. And just going back to that, Dodgers series in 2020, sure, Atlanta would have liked to have won that one. If they did, I think we'd still be talking about what I would call the A.J. Minter game when he did make that start. But, piling on to what he'd already done in the regular season and then coming back full circle to having to go back to Gwinnett, still being the most valuable Braves reliever in terms of Fangraphs wins above replacements. That's pretty interesting. But then you get into the 2021 NLCS. We always talk about Tyler Matzik, and we always will. But 6 scoreless innings out of A.J. Minter with 8 strikeouts in that series, allowing just 2 hits and 2 walks. That's another big reason why the Braves were doing it. If you ask any one of these guys, I think you say it was always having that next man up to be able to take the ball, take the baton, and complete the whole relay to the 9th inning. And it worked to great results for the Braves in the postseason. And A.J. Minter had a very important role to play in it.
So we talked slider with Luke Jackson. Certainly the cutter has become an elite weapon for A.J. Minter, a 182 average against in 2021, 152 in 2020. He's really found his groove with that pitch. If you go back to 2017, when he looked like the closer in waiting, opponents were hitting 194 against that pitch. The next year, it shot up to 250 and then 274, career high in 2019. I think I put a lot of stock in that growth, coming from his increased feel with the changeup. I remember when he got demoted in 2019, he came back and told me that he had spent a lot of time when he was in AAA working on that changeup, trying to have that other secondary pitch, so guys just weren't sitting there, waiting on that on that cutter. To that point, he'd thrown 3.1%. Cut of his changeups in 2018. It was 16.1% in 2019, shot up to 18.6% changeup use in 2020. It was down this past season, but I'd argue he's done a much better job with using that cutter to set it up and just have that secondary pitch. Minter got a 32% whiff rate with the changeup in 2021. That shows you how much now he has batters guessing. I mean, I guess I say there's no roundabout way to get to all this, but I'm interested to see how much more effective that cutter can be for him. He's coming off a year when he had a career high 25% put away rate with that pitch, so it just continues to be such a massive weapon for A.J. Minter.
Yeah, it's always great to have these weapons and pitches that you throw that you have conviction with. And sometimes it takes a little while to get there with a pitch like that. And I think and we could spend a lot of time probably going through what the pitch tendencies look like and the way that they were all charted year over year and what the changes of those were. But if anything, I would imagine that a lot of the success against the cutter was simply based on the percentage in which he was throwing that pitch and being able to eliminate really having to look for much else. And we're not talking about guys going up there batting 400 off the pitch or anything crazy like that. But you give major league hitters a 50 point, 60 point, 70 point swing there, you start to see a big difference in that. While a 250 average against it might not sound all that exciting, it actually is a pretty big deal, pretty big difference, because you're not feeling like that's the pitch you can go to complete the at bat, get the strikeout, or generate bad contact, whatever the case may be. But yeah, I like the fact that he continues to work the problem, and he's had to a lot of different times. And it says something to me for a guy that can continue to overcome some of the things that he's encountered along his path, beginning with, right about the time he's going to start his major league career, had to deal with the whole Tommy John surgery business. And, it slowed his path to the big leagues. And once he got up there, you're not guaranteed success just because you have a little taste of it here or there. And there's plenty of stories of that. The road is littered, I think, with those stories as you try to make it all the way to the World Series and, reach the city of Oz or whatever you want to say. But A.J. Minter's really, I think, shown us a lot, to make a long story short, in the way that he has attacked all of the things that he's had to deal with in order to find and continue to refine his assortment of pitches in order to continue to refine himself as a big league pitcher who can pitch in the biggest games. And I don't think there's any question about that at this point. He's shown us a lot in the postseason, and I think the Braves are going to be leaning on that left arm once again as one of the big ones in 2020, the big weapons to get the big outs yet again.
Minter is arbitration eligible this year, a $2.1 million projection via MLB trade rumors. Again, that's all based on the now expired CBA. So we'll see where things kind of sort out there once these negotiations are done. But what are the expectations for him? Is it just being able to find some level of consistency? Because obviously last year we saw him be really good when it mattered most. But, can he put that together for a full stretch? I mean, because again, we're talking about a 4-week stint in Gwinnett, and he still managed to be this team's most valuable reliever per Fangraphs.
Yeah, and that's a crazy stat. Again, the fact that he was able to do that, it does speak to, once you start to go through those numbers, I sorted all the relievers and was a little bit surprised at where Fangraphs had Luke Jackson and where Fangraphs had A.J. Minter as being over twice as valuable according to their wins above replacement metric. It's really interesting that the only more valuable pitchers on the Braves staff were all the starting pitchers you'd imagine. Charlie Morton, Max Fried, Ian Anderson, Huascar Noah was in there as well with what he was able to do until injury put him aside. But it was all starting pitchers ahead of A.J. Minter in terms of most valuable Braves pitchers by Fangraphs WAR in 2021. So if he can do that again, I'd be happy to see it. But I'd say, and I'm sure A.J. would say, without spending a month in Gwinnett would probably be the way to go. And this guy certainly has the talent to continue to be a big contributor. And with the Braves being able to stack a lot of quality relievers together, that's the strength of a championship ball club, knowing who you can hand the ball to, knowing that they're tested in the biggest battles you can have, and that they help the Braves win the war, as a matter of fact, in 2021. And I guess in some ways we could continue making wins above replacement puns as well. But it's been a very, very good run for A.J. Minter in the postseason. That, I think, gives me a lot of confidence to hand him the ball whenever he needs it, or whenever he is needed to come in and get big outs.
Well, you got to hit the advanced tab on Fangraphs, and you see it. They have a metric for wearing cowboy hats, and nobody looks better in a cowboy hat in the Braves roster than A.J. Minter does. So I think that's kind of what pushed him over the top of the edge. So just keep that in mind next time.
He's the Braves' most justified reliever.
Nice. I love it. Love a Raylan Givens drop in there. So, but I think we know going into the season, Luke Jackson, A.J. Minter are going to continue to be key pieces coming up in high leverage situations for this team without question. If you've missed any of our Stock Watch series, you can check them out on the Battery Power YouTube page. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an alert for every single new episode. Till next time, I'm Cory McCartney. He's Graham McAuley. As always, thanks for watching. We'll see you soon, Braves Country.